Hello, everyone. This week, Channel 13's investigative reporter Joe Bartels will have a special series of stories about former Zappos CEO Tony Hsieh, who died last November as the result of a fire. Today, Joe is here to give us some background information on Tony Hsieh. Who was Tony Hsieh and how did he become the CEO of the world's largest online seller of shoes?
Well, Tony Hsieh has a really interesting story. He started off, as most of us, with pretty humble beginnings. He was the son of Taiwanese parents, and he had pretty big expectations to live up to. They wanted him to get good grades, and at 9 years old, he kind of started as his own entrepreneur. He started his own worm business, and it's kind of a funny story. The worms ended up getting away, but he kind of planted the seed for what would become the beginnings of this really big shoe mogul. He went to college at Harvard, started a small internet company, and then it just blossomed from there. Shortly thereafter, in the late 90s, he became kind of an interested party in what would become Zappos, the big shoe retailer, and the rest, they say, is history. He stayed on for a number of years and then ultimately left last year around August.
Well, there's no question that Tony was brilliant, but he was also a bit strange. What was so different about Tony? What made him special?
Well, Tony was special in a lot of ways. He was eccentric. He believed in people and he wanted people to embrace their inner weirdness. And some of the things he kept, a number of different types of animals, strange animals. He lived in an Airstream trailer downtown in Las Vegas for a period of time. It's been reported that he owned only 4 pairs of shoes. So with all of the money that he had and all of the resources that he had at his disposal, he really didn't really appreciate perhaps all of the ability that he had at his fingertips, and he was very focused on people, and that was the central core of everything that he did, from his employees to the customer service, which really put Zappos on the map, and it really earned Zappos one of the best places to work in all of America, and it got a lot of people's attention. But Tony was the driving force and the big reason why Zappos is the company that it is today and why we're even talking about him.
Tony wasn't just the CEO of Zappos, though. He also invested millions of dollars, his own money, into downtown Las Vegas. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Tony spent so much of his time in Las Vegas, and he had a really important role in downtown Las Vegas specifically. About 10 years ago, he had this vision for downtown, and he wanted to make it a family-friendly place that had shops and restaurants, and it was a place to see and be seen. And he spent $350 million of his own money into investing in downtown Las Vegas. It started the Downtown Project, which, as we're going to report in our stories next week, that it spent nearly that $350 million and spent money in creating jobs as well as construction projects, about 400 or so. So he had a really big impact in changing the face and the trajectory of downtown Las Vegas. And it is argued that if it were not for Tony Hsieh and his vision, who knows what downtown Las Vegas would look like today.
I've heard that not everyone was happy about Tony's investment into downtown or how he ran things at Zappos. Is that true? Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, and we've reported at KTNV Channel 13 years ago when Tony Hsieh started to revitalize and reimagine downtown Las Vegas. The downtown core itself was kind of a depressed area for many years, and it was a place where there was a lot of people living below the poverty line. There was a lot of people who just simply were basically surviving and living in kind of rundown, maybe poor conditions. So when Tony came in, it started to change the vibe of downtown. It started to change what was available there. And as a result of that, it drove up a lot of the maybe rents and the property values, which forced a lot of people who were living below the poverty line, who were just struggling to make ends meet. Some people of color downtown really struggled with this changing atmosphere, and it forced a lot of people into very difficult decisions and difficult positions. So that was one of the critiques that people had, was that this was a gentrification of an area, which really was hard on specific and perhaps the most vulnerable populations and people in our community.
As you mentioned earlier, Tony abruptly retired as CEO of Zappos in August of 2020 and moved to Park City, Utah. What was he doing there?
Yeah, so Park City became this other kind of idea. We talked to some folks in our stories that are going to air that he was trying to maybe reimagine or recreate what he was trying to do in Las Vegas up in Park City. We know that he had purchased many millions of dollars worth of real estates, condos, homes, and properties, as well as a huge mountain mansion there. And there was talk that he was going to try and create some kind of community up there in Park City with festivals and jobs and create a new project essentially from Las Vegas, but making it in Park City. So that's what we were hearing that he was doing in there in Park City. But there were signs that there were things that were maybe troubling. And we go through some reports that show that he had several interventions with law enforcement. At one point, he was taken to the hospital by the behest of one of his friends who had called police and asked for them to assist them as well. There was also some welfare checks as well, large parties, wild parties, out of control parties, all of that detailed in reports that we have uncovered, and they'll be part of our reports.
Okay, so the fire that led to the death of Tony actually happened in Connecticut. Can you tell us why he was in Connecticut and how did the fire start? How did that whole thing happen?
So after Park City and he retired from Zappos abruptly in August 2020, we understand that he went with some friends, including his brother, we believe, to Puerto Rico for a trip in November, around the first part of November. They returned to New London, Connecticut, which is on, obviously the East Coast, and to the home of Rachel Brown, who was a longtime co-worker and friend of Tony Hsieh's. And so the night of November 18th, he was there. We understand that there was, according to investigators, some sort of argument between Tony and Rachel Brown. He decided that he was going to go into the attached shed that was kind of next to the home. There was attached, but he went in there. It was very cold that night, temperatures maybe in the 30s or dipping below the freezing mark. And we understand from the reports that came out that there were 3 separate fires that night on November 18th. 2 of them previously were not known until when fire investigators kind of revealed these details, but those were smaller fires that Tony was able to put out on his own. But that raised suspicion that his staff was concerned about his condition and his well-being. So they had rolled in a propane heater into the shed. Well, over the course of the next few hours, there were some circumstances that we go into in our reports, but inside the shed, there was candles, there was a marijuana pipe, there were inhalants, there was these whippet canisters as well as liquor. So as the fire broke out, fire investigators aren't exactly sure what led to the final and fatal fire that ultimately claimed Tony's life, but they led to 4 possibilities, but they haven't narrowed it down. They also said that it could possibly be a careless or an intentional act on Tony's behalf. That answer, we may never know what the true reason was, but those are there was 4 major ones that they believe. Candles, the propane heater maybe caught some things on fire, careless smoking discarded items, or it could have been an intentionally set fire.
Okay. Tony was worth almost $1 billion, I think 840 something million when he died, and he did not leave a will, as far as we know. Is that true?
Yeah, so based on our reporting and what we've been able to uncover in court documents, that it appears that there was no written estate plan, there was no living will or anything along those lines. And unfortunately, some experts we've spoken to say that's sometimes a common thing, despite people having incredible wealth or having ability to have their financial affairs in order. No one expects that their life is going to end so abruptly or suddenly, perhaps, and especially someone as young as Tony. So the planning of that may not have been at the forefront of his mind, clearly. And so when he died, there was a lot of questions about his estate. You mentioned his vast wealth, almost $1 billion. There is untold property and in different states and different ventures that he perhaps has. And so we've seen those kinds of things come out. We know that his brother and father have been named co-executive kind of executors of his estate, co-administrators. So they're working through trying to figure out what real estate holdings he has, what business dealings he has across multiple states. We know at least Nevada, of course, Utah as well. There could be others. So this is going to be a very lengthy process trying to track down where these items are, what properties they are, how much they're worth, and we've kind of gotten some hints as to what may happen. That's also included in our stories that are going to be coming up, including a notice of sale. We've done a very deep analysis of the property holdings that we've been able to uncover from court records. More than 100, Joyce, in downtown Las Vegas. Some of them really big names. Zappos headquarters. We also know that the Gold Spike as well. So these are well-known places in downtown Las Vegas that it seems, at least the Tony Hsieh estate is looking towards what the future holds. Whether that's a sale, selling these properties, holding on to them, we don't know, but we have definitely an idea of where this might be headed.
It appears there have already been a couple of lawsuits filed by people who believe that they are entitled to part of Tony's fortune. Do you think this is just the beginning? Are there going to be more lawsuits filed? Who has filed these lawsuits so far?
Yeah, so it's possible. There could be other untold business dealings and contracts that Tony had entered into before his death in November. So that's something that the courts are going to be deciding. The two lawsuits that you kind of alluded to have been filed by a longtime Tony Hsieh friend. Her name is Jennifer Mimi Pham, and she had a couple of business dealings or contracts that she alleges in two lawsuits that we now have in our possession. And they basically say that there were contracts and agreements that were already on the books that Tony's now estate has to live up to in terms of some business dealings and some agreements, and ultimately it boils down to money. The lawsuits I've read, they basically claim that the Tony Hsieh estate has basically gone back on their word and have not followed through on the end of the agreement that Tony Hsieh had agreed upon. So she's looking for monetary compensation of claiming breach of contract in these lawsuits. We'll see what happens. This all has to be wound through. Of course, this is going to be a very complicated case and kind of winding through the courts now that you're dealing with an estate rather than the person. And this could be just the beginning. We don't know what other dealings there could be out there. These are just the two that have come up most recently. There definitely could be more.
Right. Overall, how do you think Tony's death is going to impact the future of downtown Las Vegas? Is it going to have a negative effect? Is there anyone that you think might step into his place and kind of guide the future of downtown Las Vegas?
Yeah, I think that Tony's involvement has absolutely, without question, changed the trajectory of downtown Las Vegas for perhaps decades to come. In our reporting and in our stories that we're working on, we speak to some of the people downtown that have maybe the most insight as to where we're going and what we're going to be doing. And we spoke to the Downtown Vegas Alliance, and they point to a number of people. Derek Stevens, of course, without question, with his, being able to open circa amid a pandemic, in the depths of the pandemic in October of 2020, and really, set the bar high for what downtown is capable of. That was the first, resort that's been built in 40 years downtown. So that's just one example of something that we've seen. There are housing developments. There's an apartment complex that's being built next to Symphony Park. There's other downtown housing projects and apartments that are being built in the Arts District as well. All of those things point back to Tony Hsieh's perhaps involvement and vision and attracting so much investment dollars and so much attention to downtown Las Vegas. Derek Stevens says, without Tony's help and spurring and spearheading this idea of downtown Las Vegas becoming a place to see and be seen, who knows where it would be today. But Project Enchilada, that huge revamp of Fremont Street and the boulevard there are so many things that are working to the advantage of downtown Las Vegas. The momentum is there, so many different projects, and there's more to come. And that's the basically the bottom line of the future of downtown. There is more to come. The best is perhaps yet to come.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Joe. I know that we really only barely scratched the surface here. You're going to have 4 different stories about this. Can you tell us when these stories are going to be on TV and how we can watch them?
Yeah, so we're working on these 4 stories. They're going to start airing on Sunday now and work in order. 4 parts of it. We're calling it Tony Hsieh, the Rise, the Fall, the Future. And they're going to be on broadcast at 5 and 6 a.m. Those days, including on Sunday, I believe at 11 p.m. really insightful. Really, we're going in depth like we haven't before. So you haven't seen the Tony Hsieh or aren't sure of Tony Hsieh. He had a huge impact in Las Vegas, and it bears repeating how important and how influential and how his footprint will be felt in Las Vegas, specifically downtown, for perhaps decades to come. He has helped so many people, entrepreneurs, small businesses in our community. The impacts cannot be understated about how Tony Hsieh really influenced and impacted Las Vegas and life here, and the ability to create businesses and jobs and opportunities here in Las Vegas. So this is an exhaustive thing. We have done literally months and months of work here. As soon as we heard of Tony's unfortunate passing in November, we started kind of putting all of this together. And this, like I said, has been an exhaustive look at all of the things that Tony Hsieh has been involved in. And, it's going to be a really, I think, important piece of the series here, and people are really going to, I think, learn a lot and take a lot away from it.